Okay, we're going to give this a second try. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to hit play. And so if you haven't used Kahoot before, it's great. It's a lot of fun. You do need devices to do it, is the only thing. So what you're going to see here, it's going to load a game pin, but if you can scan this QR code, which Nicole tried earlier, it's actually much quicker because it'll take you right to the app. And you're going to put your name in and register. And there's Hanan. Good stuff. And once we have a few people in there, we'll get started. Hey, Kim. Oh, there we go. They're loading up now. I'd watch it for Kim. There's a helmet on there. Serious stuff. I don't know how many participants we have. Nicole, can you check that for me just so I don't want to get started before too many? Anise, I see you. We've got 9 people on so far. So we can get started, you think? Okay. All right, here we go. So what's going to happen, everyone, is you're actually going to have to use the 2 screens, the screen in front of you that I'm using, and also the screen on your phone. And so what's going to happen is a question is going to come up, and you're going to have a few seconds to read the question. Then the options will come up. Oh, hi, Lauren. And then on your phone, you'll actually only press the color and shape that goes with it. Keeping in mind that some questions have more than one correct answer. You don't need to choose more than one. You can only choose one, but some will have more than one correct answer. Okay, here we go. Question number 1. What is formative assessment? So you have 4 options: assessment of learning, assessment about learning, for learning, and about learning about assessment. And the quicker you answer, the more points you get. Choose the answer on your phone. Okay, so we had 6 responded assessment of learning and 3 responded assessment for learning. And assessment for learning is the correct response. Assessment of learning is what we would consider summative assessment. Next question. Emily's in the lead. Number 2, when should formative assessment be used? Your options are before, after, during learning, or all of the above.
So since everybody's answered, what I learned is the faster you go, the more points you get.
Mm-hmm.
Just so you know.
But if you get it wrong, you don't get any points. So you gotta play the game. Okay, Kim has moved into the lead on that one. So the answer was all of the above. Question number 3. There are only 5 questions. Which of these is not part of formative assessment? Effective feedback, ranking and grading, self-monitoring, or peer evaluation? Not a part of formative assessment. You're a little slower on that one. Okay. So grading and ranking is not a part of formative assessment. Again, that is part of summative assessment. Okay. We have up here, I can't see. Oh, Kim is heavily, I see, I said that was that, definitely, that was the helmet. Last question. Oh, this is 4, I guess. Which of these is an example of formative assessment? 5-paragraph essay, 50-question multiple choice test, post-assignment conversation, or think, pair, share? And the answer was think, pair, share. Ooh, Kim's still in the lead, but Carolyn's coming up. Last question, everybody. Which of these is not a characteristic of effective feedback? Timely, specific and clear, focused only on areas of growth, corrective. Not a characteristic of effective feedback. It's a tough one. Focused only on areas of growth. Corrective is it sounds like it's kind of a negative thing. However, when you're giving feedback, you do need to correct errors. And we want to focus not just on areas of growth, but also areas of strength. So areas of growth, only 2 people got that one right, but that's good. It's about learning. So we're going to find out who won. Lauren came in 3rd place. Good job, Lauren. 2nd place is Carolyn, and I'm going to guess number 1 is Kim. Good job, everybody. There we go. So one of the cool things about Kahoot, in addition to it's just kind of fun, is that you also get some other information like the summary. Now you can also pay. This is the free version. You can pay to get additional reports. And so here, for example, I can see right off the bat that only 20% got number 5 correct. Okay, so we know that that's definitely an area where we want to focus a little bit more. Whereas number 1, we had 30%, so it was a little bit better. Okay, so it'll kind of go through. These were the 2 most difficult questions, as you can see here. You can also, to go to see the full report, you would go to your Kahoot pages, and it's showing me that 44% had their questions correct. Okay, so it breaks it down a little bit more for you. Okay. So if you want to delve into that a little bit further, that information will be listed in the resources that we'll be sending out later. Okay. So back to the presentation. Now I'm in a presenter window, which I wasn't before. Do you guys see full screen, or are you seeing the presenter mode? Are you seeing full screen?
We're seeing
No.
presenter mode.
You're seeing presenter mode. My goodness, I am just not having any luck today. Okay, we are going to come out of the presentation. We're going to share it again, and we're just going to go full screen. That way there won't be any issues. Okay. So talking again about the difference between formative and summative assessment, or assessment of learning, which is summative, and assessment for learning, which is formative assessment. We do a lot more formative assessment. We do that before learning, during learning, and after learning. And summative assessment is really just after. And so you'll see here a bit of a table that shows the difference between the 2. And so the reason is to check where, kind of like the rank, the grade, the final mark on something before you typically move on. Whereas for learning, it's about improving the learning. It's really about finding out a place, where a student is, where a learner is at a place in time, and using that to inform your own instruction, but also to help them with their goals and their learning targets. So as you can see, again, of learning is only after, and formative says during, but actually before as well, because even some of our screeners and our pre-learning, it's good to know where students are before we get started, because again, that informs our instruction as well, and it helps us decide where we're going to go with that. The teacher's role, well, we're administering tests, and we're basically, we're developing it, we're assigning a grade at the end when it's summative or when it's of learning. But when it's for learning, it's again about providing feedback. It's helping to inform the students, and it involves them as well in their learning and in their own assessment, because oftentimes formative assessment can take on peer assessment and self-assessment as well. So the student's role, meet the standard, score high, or avoid failure in most cases. Okay, so with assessment for learning, it's about seeing the targets. It's about using those results to improve their learning and to set goals for the next time. So as you can see, this is really where we want to spend most of our time assessing, because by the time we get to the assessment of learning, really, we're kind of looking behind us. And so we use the summative versus formative assessment. We use this garden analogy. And basically, if we think of our learners as plants, summative assessment, we're measuring them, we're comparing them against other plants, we're analyzing the measurements, but it really doesn't affect the growth of the plants. However, with formative assessment, we're testing as we go, based on the type of food or how much water or how much sunlight that they're getting, like what effect did that have on the plant? And so another analogy that we use as well is was with food. So formative assessment would be you go to a restaurant and the chef will taste the food before it goes out to make sure that it's where it needs to be. It tastes right. It's got the right amount of salt and that sort of thing. The summative assessment is when it goes out to the restaurant and the person eating and paying is actually consuming the food. And so again, that's the difference there. So we want to make sure that we're doing as much as we can in the formative assessment before we get to the summative. And so there are some documents that we have, one of them in the province, and one of them is the formative assessment bifold. We'll look at the other part in a moment, but this first section is for formative assessment, and it includes our PDCA, or our Plan, Do, Check, Act, which again, we'll look at a little bit later in our learning cycle. But formative assessment is certainly part of really most of this. And when we look at, I'm just trying to enlarge my screen a little bit. Here we go, down here. So I can give you a better view. There we go. And so when we are looking at the formative assessment, again, it talks about improving learning. So it doesn't happen when learning's done. It happens during the cycle. And so this would be part of our planning. We do our instruction, but then we might be doing some sort of contextualization. We'll do some pre-screening and finding out where students are. And so all the way up until the summative assessment, we're really doing formative assessment the entire way along. And so we talk about collecting evidence. It needs to be, we use specific and descriptive feedback because that's the best way for learners to know where they need to go next. And that is the best way to be corrective as well. We don't want to be vague. We don't want to say, oh, you did a great job. We need to say, well, this is what you did a good job on, and here's why, or comparing it to something else that they've done, and helping them move forward with that. And the information to plan for learning that happens at different rates and is shown in many ways. So we're not going to always evaluate in the same way. Some things are going to be quick. Others are going to take more time, depending on how much in depth we want to go. And so these are some of the steps that we talk about for implementation. And again, I already mentioned pre-assessing. We certainly want to differentiate our instruction, which means we're going to differentiate our assessment as well. Making sure that we're meeting learners where they are and making adjustments and reflecting as we go. So this is kind of the formative assessment piece in the learning cycle. Okay. And there's a little bit more information over here that talks about, these are basically look-fors, what I should be looking for in my classroom. And so what am I as the educator doing, and what are my learners doing? Again, this will be provided to you in, I'll be sending this out to all of the directors, I guess, and other leads for NTLC. And so they'll have a folder with all of this information in there for if you don't already have access to it. I know sometimes these things are always available, but it's a matter of trying to find out where they are and what links to go to. So that's that one. Just using Canva, I'm trying to flip down and go to my next slide in my slide deck, and that's not what I'm doing. Try this. There we go. Okay. So the next part of our assessment piece is triangulation. And so, of course, there's a triangle. There are three parts to this, and each one is equally important. And for the longest time, we focused very much on products. It was really about summative evaluation. And so we really want to look at conversations and observations as well. And conversations and observations aren't, how can I say it? The conversation, for example, doesn't need to be between the teacher and the student. It could be peer to peer. It could be in group settings as well. And so this isn't something where we're sitting down to have a formal conversation with a learner. These can kind of show up in different ways. And so I'm just flipping through my notes too to make sure I'm not missing anything. And so there are multiple ways for that to happen. Observations, same thing. Some people like checklists. Others will use, more specific information, or they'll have sections where they can write notes. We have people that are teachers that will use the big foldouts with the Post-its on them. There are just so many ways. So you really have to find a system that works for you and try them out first. And so if you try a system and you just find that it's just too much for you to manage, then we can try to figure out ways to simplify that. Talk to your colleagues as well to figure out ways that you can make that a little bit easier for you. On the other side, sometimes it's not enough information, so the checklist doesn't always work for everyone or for every outcome, because you're looking for some more specific information. So it's important that you're actually getting the information that you need, and it's coming from the evaluation piece that you need. And products, well, lots of those. Those are quizzes, tests, projects that the students work on. It can be part of a presentation, anything where they're actually producing something. Keeping in mind as well, though, because we often think about products as being summative, but not always. A product could actually be an organizer that was used today to do some writing, or after a reading piece. And so it could be an exit slip. There are a number of products that students will produce that aren't necessarily the end game. So as we go along, there should be products that are actually used for formative assessment as well. So please keep that in mind. I've got a little video that I'm going to show you on triangulation that will explain it, I'm sure, quite a bit better than I did, and maybe fill in some of those blanks.
We want to look more deeply into gathering evidence of learning, and triangulation is the model we're exploring.
So what exactly is triangulation?
It involves gathering evidence of student learning over time from 3 different sources: observation, conversation, and product. We can then compare these different samples of evidence to each other to get as accurate a picture as possible of student learning.
We're looking at conversations that people have in the classroom, and the conversations could be teachers, students with each other.
Looking at learning through 3 different ways, right? So if we're having conversation, it's not just having a chat with our students, but it's important that we record the results of this so that we know that, okay, I'm assessing something now through our conversation.
You mean recording them on a computer or recording what they're doing? Maybe you can elaborate on that.
I think it would depend on the context. Let's say they're doing interviews in an English class. I might record it with video so that I have that evidence. Or as they're talking to each other and as they're interviewing, I might have a checklist and I'm just recording. Had great body language, was not mumbling, used correct sentence structure, etc. So it could be through video, but it could also just be through checklists or anecdotal comments, next to their names in a marking book.
Observations?
For observation, students are busy working on something. They're working on a project and I'm walking around maybe with a checklist or something like that so that I have a record of it.
And products.
And the product. Product is important. Quizzes, projects, different things that they are creating. But I think that idea of, could this be something that we give for homework? What do you think about that? Is it fair to assess something that's being given for homework?
My gut feeling is that no, because you're not really there to observe them as they're doing that homework. So it wouldn't really be a fair assessment. You're only seeing one piece of the puzzle.
And it's interesting that you're talking about fairness, because I really believe that fairness is at the heart of triangulating. I mean, we're able to observe students by paying attention to conversations, nurturing those conversations because of the work that we're providing in the classroom, by having people able to produce different products that show evidence of their learning. Each student has the opportunity to be evaluated in a way that is fair to them. It's the differentiation that is developed as a result of incorporating this into a teaching and learning practice.
Would you make things really transparent to the students in terms of the observations, conversations, and products so that they're aware of the process too?
The student is part of this process. So transparency is key.
Yeah, and I think it's only fair, like it's good practice, or it's just nice to let people know, by the way, what you're doing right now, I am recording. This is the checklist that I will be using as you are doing this activity.
And they may have helped create that checklist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that's really kind of bugging me a bit is it seems like it's almost overwhelming. Am I supposed to do this all at the same time? It seems like it's a lot of work for the students and the teachers.
I think the answer is less that you're doing it all the time, but that it's a process that's happening over time. We're not constantly, evaluating the same thing by talking about it and looking at it and assessing a final product, but that I'm aware that over time, I'm not only assessing in one way. I'm not always giving quizzes, and I'm not always only having conversations. It makes me think of that parable, of the elephant and the blind man. There were blind men that were standing around an elephant, and they were each asked to say, like, what is this that you're standing next to? And one of them was feeling only the tail, and so he said it was a rope. And another person was only feeling the trunk, so he said it was a hose. Because they were only looking, figuratively speaking, at one part of it, they weren't able to really figure out what the whole thing was. Pretty much the same as when we're in our classrooms. If we're able to look at the different elements, if over time I'm assessing through a quiz, interviews, and then maybe another quiz, and creating posters and using a Google Slides, a collaborative activity of some sort, then I'm able to, if we go back to our parable of the elephant, put all the pieces of the elephant together to come up with the elephant.
So to summarize, so instead of saying, all right, I'm just going to be looking at product all the time and quizzing them, you're really going to mix it up. And with that, you'll get a more complete picture. And that really answers my question. You're not doing it all at once. It's over time.
That's right.
It is over time, but you're beginning with the end in mind. So you have a plan, and everyone is part of the contract. It's a learning contract that really exists between students and teachers.
Yes.
Interesting. So you're really doing it together.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's what I would say. If you think about it, talking, looking, creating, it's a very collaborative process to get a good handle on what it is students know and understand and can do. One of the reasons also that we're assessing in different ways is so that we can compare these things against each other. So that, let's say I give a quiz and everybody gets a certain mark on a quiz, that I'm able to then compare that mark to the results of the conversation assessment or the results of an observation assessment to see if, am I really getting the full picture? Am I really seeing the elephant in the room?
Yeah, and when we get that clearer picture, we're able to adjust our teaching accordingly.
There we go. I had a bit of a time getting out of there. And here we go again. All right. So just a little comic for you to look at related to assessment. And, it is, I've said it myself, and I'm sure many of you have said it already. We say this on a regular basis, but I've taught them this so many times. And, it really does remind us that there are so many different ways to assess. There are different ways to teach. If we have so many of our students that are not picking up on a concept, then it's typically something that the teacher needs to change. So the next piece we're going to look at is assessment creation, because as was mentioned in the video and is very important, we do want to begin with the end in mind. And so when you, are beginning a new unit, you're starting a new section, you're going to be assessing a new outcome, it's important to know what am I assessing before I get started. It's not the time to, and again, I know you're new teachers, but with back in the day, with some more seasoned teachers, it used to be you would just go grab this would be almost time, this would be the spring binder. And I apologize, I see a typo, I'll fix that later. But it's not time to grab the March binder or the Easter binder. We don't teach by projects, and by assessing those, we assess outcomes. And so we have clear learning. We want to make sure that we clarify the learning targets for the student. And so we need to know, what's the skill descriptor? What are we assessing, essentially? And what are the achievement indicators? What are the smaller chunks of that are going to help me know that this student has met expectations for this skill descriptor, keeping in mind that a learner does not need to excel at every achievement indicator, nor do you need to evaluate each of them in order to use your professional judgment to know whether or not a learner has actually is capable of achieving this skill descriptor. And using actionable assessment is important as well. So when we talk about again, the piece of formative assessment versus summative. And so when we're uncovering thinking, it's more about assessment questions and tasks that reveal what the student's thinking rather than maybe what they just memorized. That was how I got through school. I was the perfect student. I could just remember everything, but that was back at a time when you just needed to be able to regurgitate information. And of course, we know now that that is not the best way to learn, and it's certainly not the best way to transfer knowledge from one aspect to another. And so another piece is progress monitoring. Basically interpreting the assessment evidence to determine where students are along a learning continuum, and making progress transparent to the student through self-assessment tools. So, oftentimes you would have a self-assessment for the student, and then you would have your assessment as well. And that's something that you need to discuss to see whether or not the student is on par with what you're seeing as well. Because if not, then that means that there are some misconceptions in there somewhere, or there's a gap in the knowledge. And feedback for agency. And so this is important because, again, we want to provide the feedback, not just for it to be corrective, but so that it actually promotes the empowerment for the student, and so that they're actually able to reflect on what you've talked about and use that information to help them set their goals for future learning as well. And again, as was previously mentioned, it's very important to have ongoing and real-time feedback. So we don't wait until the end of a unit or the end of a piece of learning before we provide feedback for students. We want it to be in real time. And so it is something that we need to be doing on an ongoing basis. And this is why it's so important to have multiple ways of assessing. And so with our holistic curriculum as well, we do look at assessment a little bit differently. And so pulling the information from the pedagogies here, talking about holding learners in the highest regard, using different types of instruction, but making it relevant, making it a safe and positive place for learning. That's, these are things that in a holistic curriculum we do hold very highly. And so this piece with holding learners in the highest regard comes back to involving students and learners in their learning. It's not just a matter of being a vessel where you're just pouring information in. They really need to be involved in the learning and understand the relevance of it, how it's pertinent to them, and how they're going to know whether or not they've achieved at the, I guess as they're going, but also at the end of a section or a unit. And then we also have our shared tenets: Wabanaki history and culture, identities, inclusion and equity, lifelong learning, and the rest. So looking at assessment, again, as I mentioned earlier, using the skill descriptors and the achievement indicators, you would use a rubric. These are, again, examples that we will make sure that you have. Well, actually, I will grab the Holistic Curriculum Resource Guide as we have it. And I'll make sure that that is also in the packet of information that goes out to all of the districts so that you'll have access to that via your own Teams pages. And so there are different simple ways to have assessments here. We talk about just a single point rubric. So it's either essentially a yes or a no. Either they have it or they don't. There are observation charts, student portfolios, conversation logs, peer and self-assessments, And then whatever assessments that you're already using, that you feel that work well for you in a formative sense. And so to the right, you'll see some template examples and of the items that I just mentioned. And again, these are just examples. It's sometimes a good starter for people, but you can certainly take those and you can develop what works for you in your classroom. Can't say this enough, beginning with the end in mind and co-construction. And so there's a little quote there by Rick Stiggins: students can reach any target that they know about and that holds still for them. And so it's so important to make sure that students know before they start where they're going. You wouldn't, well, I guess my husband would. You wouldn't get in the car and just go for a drive not knowing your destination. I know there are those out there that are just wild and they'll go anywhere, but typically you're going to have a destination. And so you need to know where you're headed before you leave. And the students need to know that as well so that they can actively participate in the learning process. And so the other piece is that it holds still for them. If the criteria change, then we need to have students be aware of that as well. And that's okay. Criteria can change. Sometimes the assessment criteria change because we're learning as we go as well. And so sometimes we realize that maybe a certain way that we've decided to evaluate doesn't quite work for what we were hoping for. And so we let students know that. And we say, you know what? I think this is we tried this and I think it worked okay, but I really feel like we could do better. And again, involve them. So, giving students an outcome and having them involved in what does it actually look like for me to, as a learner, to have met this outcome. We need them to think about this as well. We're not just feeding this information to them. We want them to be involved. And we want to continuously go back and refer to this criteria. It could be posted on an anchor chart, which I would very much encourage. Students might have copies that they have, in their books that they've written down as well. Maybe it's something that after the co-construction is done, that someone in the class wants to maybe decorate it before they put it on the wall. They're going to be using it probably for a while. And so instead of having pre-made decorations on the wall, because that's what a lot of students think of when they see these lovely posters and things that make a classroom look really great. But if a student wasn't involved in their creation, oftentimes that's how they see it. They see it as a decoration, and we want them to be part of it so that they're actually thinking about using it. You want to refer to it often. You want to refer students to it often. Once you have your success criteria created, you want to have students hauling that out as soon as you start working on that in that area again. So a few techniques for sharing those learning targets. It can be in a simple statement. If you feel that the skill descriptor is written in student-friendly language for your grade level, you can certainly have that written as a statement. If it's not, you can feel free to adjust that. There are ways to do that. Anyone that's done any PL with me already knows that I love the Copilot, any of the AI that's available. You can actually take that information, pop it into ChatGPT or any of those AI, artificial intelligence bots, and just say simplify, or simplify for a grade 1 student, or you can go with age level. So you can do that. Another thing is to talk to the students about it and say, this sounds a little bit complicated, and maybe give them some words that they might know if they're younger, and some terms, and build it together. Because again, this is together. It's not them making the decision. It's getting them talking about it as well, which is great for contextualization for students, and it puts them in the mindset of what they're going to be working on. Models and exemplars are an excellent way to show them what good work looks like. So we often hear teachers will talk about showing models of what not to do. And we actually know now that is not the best way to show students because oftentimes they'll find somewhere in the middle. And so we want to show them what really, really good work looks like. We don't want to show them what not great work looks like. And we want them to have that great model. And so you can use products from year to year. Just take the student's name and any identifying information out, and you can share them amongst students. You can ask them to grade them or rate them, or maybe make notes in them, depending on kind of how you want to use those in your classes. And with that, you'll have a much more stronger performance of understanding for students. I'm just going to take a quick break there before I move on and see if there are any questions, mostly because I'm not feeling great and I have a dry throat. Oh, okay. Feel free to pop any questions that you have in the chat, okay? Again, going back to talking about the criteria, the co-construction. So obviously, if it's co-construction, you need to involve students. You need to engage them in self-assessment. It's not about always having assessments created by the teacher. This is something that you can actually have students both create and use. There are some simple self-assessments that you can get that are very general, and those are great too. But another way to find out if students have really understood material is to ask them to create a small assessment, to even 2 or 3 questions. Increase your sources of specific descriptive feedback, and it assists students to set goals. So having students collect and present evidence of learning in relation to standards basically means that, when they're involved in the co-construction of the criteria, they understand what good work looks like, what they should be producing. They can also defend that. So going through their portfolio and looking at the multiple pieces of evidence that they have and choosing 1 or 2 and saying, this is why this, it could be, again, a product, it could be a video that they've done, a recording, it could be an organizer, it could be a final product. But this is why this item shows that I really understand and I excel, or I'm meeting this standard, and they can defend that. And without doing all of those other pieces, students are going to really struggle at that part. I could talk all day just about feedback. It could be its own presentation in itself. But very simply, it is diagnostic and corrective. I know, again, we hear that word corrective and we think it's negative, but it's really not. Corrective in a sense that, just like myself as a language teacher, if I had a student say j'ai allé, I would repeat to them. I would say, est-ce qu'on dit j'ai allé? And they would kind of think, or I would say, je suis allé, and they would, okay, I made a mistake. So that's really what corrective means. You are correcting, but it's not the teacher coming with their red pen and making corrections. It's about being corrective to the student and allowing them to actually make the changes. In fact, speaking of having the red pen, I also very much recommend that if you are ever sitting down to do any type of writing work with your students, that you never have a writing implement in your hand. It actually keeps you from writing anything down. That way it's the student that's actually doing the work and not you, which is important because they're the ones that are supposed to be doing the learning. Again, just-in-time feedback, very important. It needs to be in real time. And in order for it to be corrective, that piece is very important. So as you're doing your observations and you're having conversations as well, those are the times to actually talk to students, make your notes, but also talk to students about how they can be improving, just in small areas here and there. And then additional formative assessments are recommended to assess student goals. We keep doing it over and over and over. And that's why it's so important to have multiple ways of having that. So just in the way that you did a great job is really not good feedback, just like this cartoon, so you do need to be specific. It's very important. Here are a few feedback stems. And again, this will be provided in your packet. And just a few of these that you can use. You don't always have to kind of look the same way. What difference could it make if? And so that's kind of like saying, what if you tried this? The student knows that you're telling them that they should be doing something a certain way. And if they don't feel like it should be, they're going to try and defend what they've done. Okay, that's a good example. So again, this is focusing on strengths. Okay, this one may be questioning, you're not really sure, so you need them to explain, why did you include this? And so here are a few feedback stems that you can use, and you can certainly feel free to grab a couple every day and use those, and maybe those are the ones you're going to use, or you might just keep kind of the chart and pick and choose. I'm one that likes to kind of focus on certain ones, and in my assessments, I find it's easier. I don't forget. And so I can see we're getting short on time already. So I'm going to show you quickly our teaching process map. So plan, do, check, act, which we did take a quick look at earlier, but it's on the second, this is kind of the second piece when we're talking about the learning cycle. So you'll see this often. I'm going to blow this up a little bit for you. But this is basically showing you from start to finish. This is the learning cycle. And so at the beginning of the year or at any given time, the first thing you're going to do is look at your curriculum document and look at a yearly plan. And so your yearly plan is not going to be specific in the beginning. It's just giving you an idea of where should my students probably be at the beginning of the year, and where do I want them to be at the end. And then you can follow this flow chart to help you go through like lesson planning. It talks about, again, different ways of collecting evidence, which would be your assessments. If we come up here and a student is struggling, we have our lesson plans, so we're going to do down here. But if we go over and we're having, some issues here, then a little bit of reflection. Oh, I don't know if we reached our objectives, so we're going to go back this way. We're going to look at some differentiation, maybe some flexible grouping. If the answer is yes, well, we're going to move on. Outcome complete, excellent. And then you move on to the next objective, or you can, if you're complete, no, go on to the next objective within that unit. And if yes, you'll do a summative. So this is a really great one to follow. And again, we'll send you a copy of this and the link available for that. And coming back. So we're talking about all this proof, all this data, but then what do we do with it? Again, we use it to inform our instruction. And so the data, again, we hear the word data and we often think numbers, and sometimes it is. You could be using a 4-point scale, a 1-point scale, 2, 3, whatever. And, in high school, I know that, we use percentages as well. And there might be letter grades. All of that is data, but also so are all of the formative assessments, all of the exit slips, all of the observations and conversations. And, some people will enjoy putting those sorts of things into like color-coded spreadsheets, which can make things a lot easier. So all of that information that you're collecting, that's what you're using to inform your instruction. And going back and using the teaching process map that I just showed you to decide, okay, are we ready to go? And it doesn't mean that 100% of students will be meeting outcomes before you move on. At a certain point, you're going to need to move on because there are more than just a couple of students in the class. However, you still want to remember that if you do move on with a student who has a gap in their learning, that gap is going to get wider unless they get some sort of intervention. So we need to make sure that we're constantly going back and working with those students that need those interventions. And that's how we decide if it's going to be the whole class, or we're going to have to do some small group. You may need to go back and reteach the entire concept because the whole class is struggling. And again, comes back to prioritizing how you're going to go about that. So the next map is the intervention process map. It looks very much like the teaching process map. I'm going to interrupt as well, just to say that for the teaching process map, we also do have that in French. The intervention process map, we do not, but I'll make sure that all 3 of those documents are available to you. And so looking here at the intervention process map, this is when we already know that we have some students that are struggling. And so you can see here that the actions, decision points, and intervention options are by color and shape. And so this will actually help you make decisions. So has the intervention been successful? This is kind of at the end. I'm on the wrong spot. Here we go. And so concern regarding a student's academic or social success. And then you start following here. And again, it's just a simple flow chart, yes or no, and looks at interventions by tier. Of course, tier 1 is for all students anyway. So this will actually, if we're not already using some of these we'll say tier 1 interventions, we should be using them on a regular basis with all of our students regardless. And so hopefully we can take care of it here. And if not, we'll move up to tier 2 and tier 3. So that'll be something, again, that will be provided to you that is easy to follow. And this is for both academic and behavior. Okay. So now the practical ideas. I've left myself with 15 minutes, I see, to give you some ideas that you can use right away. Some of these you might be using already, and I hope that you are, but if not, here we go. So first one is dry erase boards. For some reason, I don't have my picture of the dry erase boards, but I'm going to bet that you all know what they look like. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. I'm going to just come out of the presentation. That way you can actually see it. I'm not really sure. Let me try again. No, okay. I'm just going to come out of the presentation so you can see from here. And I will just remove the notes and get this gone. And then that way you can just see. So dry erase boards, here we go. I will just enlarge this instead, and we will use it this way. Oh, that's what happens, I guess, when it gets too big. So true or false multiple choice, very quickly, you can ask as students, you know, is this true or false? Just write a T or an F, and then everyone holds up their board at once. You may not always have time to log that information, but if this is a question where you've, let's say, you know, 95% of the students say true, only, you know, a couple say false, well, you can probably take note of that. You might only ask a couple questions. They can do an illustration for something. Again, this is another spot where you can have them do graphic. You can build a simple, like a T chart or a KWL chart. SVA en français. So these are ways, again, that you can have students use these boards, but you're not going to save something for it for later. Keeping in mind, though, if you do want to save some of this information, all it takes is a simple photo with your device in your classroom. Entrance slips for connecting previous lessons, super good idea. Getting students, again, having that contextualization as soon as they come into class, reminding them about what you did last time and helping them connect to that prior knowledge. On the other side, of course, exit slips. You can just use emojis, preferably happy face, straight face, sad face. You know, not so much with the poop emoji, but it's up to you. Also, one of the nice parts of the dry erase boards is that they're visual, they're tactile, and they're kinesthetic. So students are moving, they're touching something, which can also be very helpful in their learning. And you can use them pre, during, or post. Again, they can be used as an exit slip, it can be used during learning, and also as an entrance slip. Okay. The next one is a think or write, pair, share. And one of the things I love about the think, pair, share is that it also gives you wait time, which is so super important for students. We see this more so in an additional language. So if you have language learners in your classroom, this is even more important for them. So you'll see right off the bat, you can think or write for 30 seconds or a minute. And again, just because students are thinking doesn't mean they can't be writing. It doesn't need to be a writing activity. This can be very helpful for students, especially those with processing disorders and ADHD, where they can actually write their information down so they don't forget it as soon as the activity begins. And they can be using anything, like, you know, you can doodle, you can write, use your laptop, pen and paper, whatever. So after 30 seconds or a minute, then it's time to pair. And so this is the part where you might just turn to your shoulder partner. You might have clock partners or cell phone partners that you've already set up for a certain time. Or it might be a matter of, you know, just looking around and finding someone with the same color eyes, or that's also wearing, you know, sneakers today, whatever, however you decide to do it. And so you could be explaining something, you could be defending an opinion about something, or sharing an opinion, or providing information about something from a previous lesson or a current lesson. There are just so many different ways that this can work. And that's where the share comes into play. So you can share with your peer, then you can move one peer group with another peer group to share again, or you can say to one of the students, what did you, and the nice piece about this too is that it really brings the risk down for students, because you're not asking them what their answer is, you're asking them what the answer of their peer was. And so, you know, and they'll say, well, I forget. That's okay. You can ask them again. And so again, it's more about listening in this case than it is about providing the response. And so so that can be really helpful. This is one that I use very often in my classroom for multiple reasons, and there's so many different ways to use it as well. So it can be really helpful for that. The next one is quizzes. I mean, quizzes, pretty simple. You can create quizzes. Again, true, false, match, multiple choice, completion, short answer, or essay. If it's essay, it's going to be a short one for sure. But this can be done with a variety of media, like we already saw today. So it can be done with whiteboards. It can be done electronically. It can be done with pen and paper. There are just so many different ways to do it. Quizzes can also be done where you've given a prompt and then students are actually asked to provide a response orally, but it's going to be recorded. So lots of different options there. But just be sure to connect your questions to specific learning objectives, okay? That way we want to make sure we're all using our time the most effective way possible. Kahoot, which we saw this afternoon. And another one of my favorites, though, for so I will send the links to those, by the way, because there are two different links. One of them is for the app, if a person wanted to have that always on, and the other is actually to the website for the teacher. Another one that you can use, though, and I won't show the video because we just don't have enough time this afternoon, but you can easily go to the video, and Plickers are very easy to use. The great thing with Plickers is that the only person that needs a piece of tech is the teacher. And so basically you print off cards that look like this. It takes less than 5 minutes to assign your students to the card, and you can use the same card for multiple classes, and as long as they're printed on good heavy cardstock. I don't recommend laminating them because the shininess sometimes doesn't work with the device when it's being scanned. And basically, these are for true, false, or up to 4 question multiple choice questions. And so on each of the Plickers, which you probably can't see there, but if I enlarge it a lot, you can see these numbers and letters. And so we've got 1 and I guess, 1, 2. So depending on which way it's turned will dictate whether or not the student is answering true or false, or A, B, C, or D. And so sometimes they make mistakes too, but once you get using them a little bit, students will get used to using them. And so again, you only need 1 set of cards. They are free to print off, but I would suggest that if you're going to use them, that you do ask your principal or your admin assistant to put them on good heavy paper, not just regular paper. Cardstock is even better. Some people like to take them to the UPS store or to Staples to have them printed. And so you'll keep these, of course, and distribute them as needed, because you can use these for multiple classes. And so for each class, when you go into the original website, when you're assigning the quiz, you'll choose the class that you're working with, and it automatically knows which card goes with which student. So they're super easy to use, no tech necessary other than the teacher. And so what happens is the teacher will scan over, back up here. The teacher will actually, you can see it in the picture once I make it smaller. You can see the teachers actually scanning over, and if you look really closely, you can see a little name up here. So as you scan this, the learner's name pops up, and so you know that you've actually scanned their answer. That information then goes to the website from the quiz that you've provided, and provides you again with really super quick data that the students can see one portion of it, but again, there's no, there isn't personal information on there. And with the rest of the information that you can look at later, you can get a little bit more in-depth information if you want to take some time. So this is one of the nice pieces, rather than using a whiteboard, where you can actually save that information and look later to see how students responded. It can be used for corrective feedback immediately, or it's something that maybe you can hold on to and talk about the next time you have those students in that classroom. So that's Plickers. Inside Outside Circle. Inside Outside Circle is really great, again, for sharing. It's a little bit like a think, pair, share, but you're going to share your answers multiple times. And so what you see here is just a group of 8. You can certainly do more than 8 as long as you've got an equal number. If you do have an uneven number of students in class that day, then you can certainly pair 2 people to 1. And so basically, pardon me, you'll give the prompt. It could be maybe change the title of the story that we, today. And again, this is something that they can prep ahead, or you might be looking for a quicker answer. You might be looking to see how quickly a student is able to answer maybe a math problem, or how much information they can provide about a topic that was talked about in class. And so they pair up. Only one ring, in either the inside or the outside circle, speaks. The other must listen. That is their only job. And so, because in the listening, that's also going to be the person recording that information that's going to possibly give that to someone else at a later date, including the teacher. And so you'll say, inside circle, please provide your answer or share your information with outside circle, who is not allowed to say anything whatsoever. And that's who you will question after. Once you're done, you'll say, okay, inside circle, change partners to the left by 2. And so they'll rotate and they'll give the same information, but to a new partner. You can do the outside circle as well. It's however you want to do it. And again, you can have as little as 3 and as many as, I guess, as large as the circle you want to go. But I find the sub circles certainly make it easier for you to move around and do some observations. Give them the answer is always fun. I find, especially, and I gave 2 examples, both math and grammar, but these are more simple examples. So giving them, even the student, the answer, and they need to give you the question. And so they have to explain. So in the second example and again, for me as a language teacher, in the sentence, the boy is eating an apple, boy is a noun. Well, that's fine if they can identify, but that's really low on Bloom's taxonomy. We want them to be able to explain, how do I know this? How do I know that boy is a noun? And so then you're getting much more in depth. And this is also something that you can pair with some of these other formative assessment techniques. Okay. And so you'll definitely go a lot deeper in understanding when you're asking students to explain how you know. But you've already done the first step for them. You've given them the answer. Cubing is another tactile kinesthetic activity, which you'll notice most of these are as well, which can be very good for students, having them move around. And cubing's great. You just need some dice, which are super cheap at the dollar store. And if you really need dice and you can't afford them, let me know. I have all kinds. And so normally I would go through these questions with you, but we don't have time to do in small groups. But essentially, you create 6 questions. And with those 6 questions, you want to make sure that you've got questions that are, again, at different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So if you said, what is cubing? Well, I could explain that maybe based on, how, I guess you could explain it based on what I just said. But if I was to say, give a characteristic of effective feedback, okay, so this is important. We talked about it, but I'm kind of testing my memory, but I'm also thinking about the formative assessment. When should it be used? Again, something we've talked about, and maybe it isn't something you've talked about. Maybe it is a deeper kind of learning type of question. You're trying to see, based on what the student knows, are they going to be able to transfer that information and take it that much further? Give an example of formative assessment that you've used in your classroom. So this is the top of Bloom's. This is showing that you can actually do it and reproduce something and make it your own. And so this would be, giving an example is one thing, but giving an example of something you've done is another step higher. Little bit like the one we talked about before, but kind of more Jeopardy oriented for those of you that know that show. Basically, you will just simply give the answer. So unlike give them the answer, where you're kind of, we know that blah, 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 or in this sentence, blah, you're literally giving an answer. So the answer might be a number. It could be, so you might say, it might be math class, and you might say 72. And so there could be multiple answers to that question. Whereas in maybe a science classroom, you're saying you're going to give them maybe an observation, and they're supposed to know that it's an observation and not an inference. And so these types of things. So again, giving a very short answer and then figuring out who has the question. We talked earlier about peer assessment and self-assessment, and it is very, very important for peers to talk to each other and to be exposed to work as well that their peers are doing so that they can be inspired by it, but also understand that, okay, I see they made that same mistake that I did. And so it kind of brings that risk down a little bit, but at the same time, as you probably know, it's a lot easier to see mistakes and to be able to kind of pick apart the work of someone else than it is for yourself, because you've done it so many times. That's why when we have something important that we need to submit, we always give it to a colleague that we trust or a friend to look it over. And so that piece is important. So 2 stars and a wish is quite popular, and basically 2 stars would be 2 things that you found that, let's say, a piece of writing that were done well, and or that you feel that maybe met the standard. And then a wish would be something that you would like to see improvement on. And so for some people, or for some learners, it could be more interesting title. For others, it could be maybe the, using a certain grammar tense, verb tense, or a certain grammatical structure, those sorts of things, again, with writing. And it might be as part of a presentation. There are lots of different ways to use 2 stars and a wish. And again, self-assessment. So you may co-construct the self-assessment with the student at the beginning of the unit. And so this is the piece where you're having students actually assess their own skills. And so if I'm never reflecting on what I'm able to do or what I think I'm able to do, and being able to compare that against a norm or a standard, or against even what the teacher feels that I'm able to do, then it really makes it hard for me to set goals and be able to reflect again later to know if I'm progressing. And so that's why this part is really, really important. And students can share their self-assessments with their peers as well. So that can be very helpful. It doesn't just need to be about kind of how they're doing in class. It really should be, kind of behaviorally, because I see that a lot, really should be about their own learning. And so one last little cartoon, I guess, or meme. And that is the end of the presentation. So with 2 minutes left, I would like to, because I did not do any, I did a little bit of pre-assessment. We didn't do any during. I would really like to find out from you, based on what your expectations were of this presentation, what questions did not get answered for you. And you can either put those in the chat, or you can go ahead and share those out. Or a question you still have, maybe something that wasn't quite clarified for you, something that we can maybe support you in going forward, or an area that maybe some of those things you've tried and they've worked really, really well for you and you want to share that. I would love to hear from you at this point, because my voice is getting very hoarse.
Quiet group.
Yeah, I know it's hard when we're online. It's so different when we're together forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yes, Hanan. That is another one that actually was in my original presentation, the Socrative or Socrative. I've used that as well for quizzes, and it's a really great one. I just didn't think I'd have enough time to talk about all of them. But yeah, that's another great one too. Thanks for sharing that. It's good to see that someone out there is using it. Anybody? Nobody? Okay. Well, it's 5 o'clock, everyone. And so, I just really thank you for coming. I really appreciate that you were here. I hope that you found something useful. I will be taking note of who was attending today. So if you are looking for something specific and you didn't want to talk about it today, but you want to reach out to me, please feel free. And Nicole and I will get that package of resources together, and we'll send them off to Gail and Craig and Jay, and make sure that you have access to those, I would guess, through your own Teams pages in your districts. So if there's nothing else, that's us. That's formative assessment, everybody. Joanne likes using Think, Pair, Share. Oh, I love it. With your art students. That's awesome.
Cool.
Good to see. Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Oh, awesome.
Okay. Amber, back to you, Amber.
Yeah. Thanks, Cindy. I'm sorry your voice was froggy, and I'm sorry that you had tech issues.
I'm more concerned about the tech issues. I just don't like wasting time. I'm sorry, everybody, but
it's okay. These things happen. So Thank you so much, everyone. Remember, if you want the resources, I know Cindy and Nicole are going to send them out. Do you want them to reach to their leads, or we can also post them? We can also post a link to them on the PL Hub. So you don't actually have to send them, and they could go on the PL Hub and download them and print them off.
I can talk to you about that. I can talk to you about that. That's probably the best way, because we would like for it all to be in one central place and not have to go to a bunch of different places to find it. I think that is a great idea. Write that down.
So you and I will talk about that. We'll figure that out. Give us a little bit of time, guys, and we'll get them up on the PL Hub. Thank you so much. This is, Jay is going to do the next one on the collective agreement. So it's probably a really interesting, I know that it's a very interesting session that you're probably going to want to attend, because most of you, I assume, are Ds. And so and we do have a new collective agreement in place. So it'll be informative for those of you to get some more information about what it looks like, what staffing looks like, what procedures look like, things that have changed. So that's coming up. And then we have a 1-day PL day towards the end of the year. Originally, I had set it for June. I'm going to have to back it up a little bit and host it, I think, in May. But we'll be in touch. We'll be in touch about that, and I hope that you'll be able to come to Fredericton for the day and have a nice celebration of You Day, of all the hard work that you've put in this year on your first year. So that's what we hope will happen. So thank you so much, everyone. We will post this up on the PL Hub, and I'll send you out the link. And so anybody who didn't get a chance to watch it, you'll have the opportunity. And I will stay back in case anybody has any questions.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Have a great night,
evening,
guys. There we go. Don't you love technology when it decides not to be your friend?
Yeah.
So annoying, right? But
are you going to turn off the recording?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Boop, boop, boop. Stop recording. Stop.
That was great, Cindy.